Hi everybody, this is Mike Moran. I'm your instructor for Lesson 2 of the UCLA Extension course on Web Analytics. Lesson 2 is on direct marketing principles and metrics. I'm the author of a couple of books that both talk about how you can use web analytics in internet marketing. One is Search Engine Marketing Incorporated. The other is Do It Wrong Quickly, which looks at the broader issue of internet marketing as a whole. I'm happy to be teaching this class to you. I have a lot of experience in web analytics. I used to manage the web analytics team at IBM.com, and through work with many clients, I've learned a lot of things about how you approach web analytics, and one of the most important ones is to understand what the direct marketing principles are that underlie all successful use of web analytics in digital marketing. So let's get started. Try to imagine a catalog marketer, someone who's been working in direct marketing for many years, who comes and says to the boss, "Hey, I shipped February's catalog on time, and it's under budget, customers like it, and it looks beautiful. Want to see it?" You know what the boss would say? "You're fired." Now, why would the boss react that way? Well, simply because there are a lot of questions the boss has, but none of them are about the things that the catalog marketer said. The boss wants to know which products sold better month over month. The boss wants to know, of the ones we changed the pictures for, did they sell more or less? Which products in the catalog sold the worst? We ought to clear them out so that we can bring some new ones in. The boss has a lot of questions to ask, but none of them are about the budget, what customers think of the catalog or what it looks like. The boss wants to know about sales. The boss wants to know about response. Who responded and what did they do? And that's what direct marketing is all about. Now the problem is that if we change the story a little bit, suppose I said we completed the redesign of the website on time and it's under budget, customers like it, and it looks beautiful. Want a demo? Suddenly that doesn't seem so funny, because too often that's how we approach digital marketing, whether it's website design or any other kind of digital marketing. We approach it as though it's some kind of technical tour de force, as though all it's about is completing the project. And it's not about the response. It's not about the sales. It's not about what the business value is of what we're doing. And that's what we need to change here. That's what we're trying to figure out. So the question is, if you're in digital marketing, are you going to figure this out before your boss does? It's incumbent upon you that you do. And so let's look at how you can apply the traditional principles of direct marketing. How can you apply them to digital marketing? That's what you really need to understand, and that's what web analytics is going to allow you to do. So every time you're using the skills you pick up in this course on web analytics, you're applying basic direct marketing principles. If you're not, you're probably not going to be successful. There's a lot of ways to use web analytics, but if you're trying to use it for marketing purposes, using direct marketing principles is going to make all the difference. So let's look at how direct marketing started. Direct marketing didn't start on the web. Looking at conversions, which we'll talk about in a moment, didn't start in digital marketing. It started with direct marketing. It started with catalogs. It started with direct mail pieces. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of a catalog or a direct mail piece, you may have asked yourself, how is it that these kinds of approaches work? You might say to yourself, well, I've never ordered anything from it. Or you might be one of those people that does order, But you wonder, how many people are there like me? And what's really going on when you're receiving any kind of direct mail or catalog piece is that a marketer is on the other end of that, carefully watching how many people buy, carefully watching how many people call the toll-free number, all because they're trying to make the most people purchase their products. And so there are all sorts of techniques that they use to try and figure out how that's done. The way they start the process is with measurement. Now, to a traditional brand marketer, that might seem odd. Usually you think of measurement as happening after the fact. Measurement is something that we do after we run our marketing campaign. So after we've done whatever it is, then we figure out how to measure it to see whether it worked. That's not how direct marketers think. Direct marketers start with defining the numeric objectives of what they're trying to do. So they start with measurement. They start by saying, here's what we expect to happen. Then they experiment. They try many different approaches, and they test before they're ready to send out that direct mail piece or that catalog. They have tested and tested different versions of it. You see, it's just as easy to send out a good letter as to send out a bad one. So instead of just writing one letter and sending it to 1 million people on the mailing list, a good direct marketer will write 100 letters and send them each to 1,000 people, and then figure out which of those letters creates the most response, which of those letters gives you the highest sales. And at that point, they send that letter to the rest of the 1 million people on the mailing list. They also monitor, even as the campaign is going on, because they never stop tweaking, they never stop changing, they never stop trying to find something that works a little bit better. So if you think that it's pretty detail-oriented to be trying to change your response rate from 2.3% to 2.6%, you're getting the idea. That's what direct marketing is about. It's about small changes that over time add up to big results. So direct marketing is run by the numbers. Whether it's direct mail or catalogs, the way you approach direct marketing is the same. The elements that go into direct mail or catalog pieces might look different. So the same person that you would hire to write that long direct mail letter that's trying to entice you to pick up just one more credit card, that's probably not the same person that you'd hire to write the short catalog blurbs or take the pictures of product catalogs. So those elements look very different from each other, but everything else about the process is the same. You have to focus on segmentation. You have to know who you're sending things to. You don't just send everything to everyone in your mailing list. You look at demographics. If you're in B2B, you look at firmographics like company size or industry. You also look at other factors like recency, frequency, and monetary, which we'll talk about a little later in our course. But suffice it to say, you're going to take a look at your mailing list and you're going to decide who you're sending this particular piece to. The message has to be consistent. It has to be persuasive because you're trying to get somebody to do something. And you're going to spend a lot of time on testing. You're going to make many different versions. You're going to look at the response rate for each one. You're going to look at multiple designs, multiple kinds of copy, and over time, you're going to tweak and tweak and change until you get a winner. Now, the response that you get is fairly low. If you were to compare the response you get to a retail store where you're counting how many people of the ones who walk in the door buy, you would find that direct mail and catalogs have a far lower response rate, but it's okay because it doesn't cost very much. Now, digital marketing can run the same way as direct marketing. Just like the difference between catalog marketing and direct mail letters were in the elements in digital marketing are different. So the same person that you would have writing that long direct mail letter or taking the pictures of the catalog, they may not be the same people that you would have designing your website or doing a YouTube video. So the kinds of things you do in digital marketing might require specialists who have different skills, just as there are differences between catalog and direct mail. But everything else in this list can be the same. So if you look at all the things that I've colored in blue, you have to do segmentation. You do it a little differently. You're segmenting search keyword lists, you might be segmenting email lists. There are different kinds of lists that you might be segmenting, but the truth is that there are many different factors that you can segment by, and segmentation is just as important in digital marketing as it is in direct marketing. The message also must be written to be persuasive. It's not enough to say I have an online brochure or I have awareness of people because they come to their website. What you really need is to persuade people to take action. You need to get people to do something. And while it's still not the norm in digital marketing, it is a wonderful place to do testing. There are many, many ways of testing your marketing message, testing your approach, testing your user interface, testing your offers, testing your products. You can test just about anything online and find out what works the best. And just as with offline direct marketing, conversion rates can be very low. It's not unusual to have very successful websites that have only 2 or 3% conversion rates, sometimes even lower than that. But it's all right because it doesn't cost very much. It's all right that the conversion rates are low because you're getting a return on investment, because the amount of money that you're spending to put together that website, to put together that YouTube video, to put together that digital marketing campaign is not very much. And so because that's not terribly expensive, your return on investment can be quite good. So the first thing you have to start out with is to understand what the goal is of your particular website. Assuming that that is where you're trying to get people to go, no matter what your digital marketing tactic, if you're trying to get people to come to a website, you're trying to get them to do something. So when we talk about how direct marketing is built on response, it's rather important for us to know what response we're trying to get. With traditional direct marketing, you're typically trying to get people to pick up the phone and call and hand you their credit card number to buy something. And that might be exactly what you're trying to get people to do on your website as well. Or you might have other things that you're trying to do. You might be trying to sell things, or you might just be trying to get people to move offline to a different channel. So the question is, what are you trying to do? How you set the goals of your website is going to determine the success of your marketing program, and it's going to help you understand what it is that you have to do in order to make direct marketing work for your digital marketing. So let's look at some common types of websites. You need to figure out which of these goals characterizes your website. And it could be that it's even more than one. If you have an e-commerce site, you're trying to get sales online. You're trying to get web sales. So that's a fairly easy to understand goal. If you're Amazon.com, I mean, whatever website you have, if you have a shopping cart, you're trying to get people to buy things online, that's your goal, web sales. Now, you might have other goals too, but that's your primary goal. Most companies do not have e-commerce sites. They don't have the goal of web sales, or at least it's a very minor goal. Most companies are trying to get people to buy offline. So they might be trying to get people to troop down to the store and buy something, or they might be trying to get people to call up on the phone, but they're trying to get them to do something offline. Now there are some sites, many in B2B, where you don't even think of the goal as being sales, even offline sales. What you're really thinking about is generating leads. And this is kind of just a minor distinction in some ways, because the purpose of a lead is to sell them something offline. So what's the difference between an offline sales site and a lead site? Well, the major difference is how early they get offline. So a lead site typically sends somebody offline much earlier in the process than an offline sales site. Some sites send people offline very rapidly. They're really only looking for market awareness. They're just there the same way that a TV commercial or a billboard on the highway will give you an idea about a brand. It'll show you something about a company or about a product, and it's just trying to keep that in the front of your mind, and that's really its only purpose. Other sites are for information or for entertainment, where there really isn't any product except what you're consuming on the website itself. And some sites are devoted to persuasion. They're not really trying to sell anything except a point of view. And we're going to look in some detail at all of these kinds of sites so that you can not only understand what kind of site you have, but you can also try and see who are the kinds of sites that I want to look at, so that I can kind of figure out what the right practices are. If I see someone in my industry with my kind of website that's doing something that's really going to make a difference, I want to be aware of that and understand who I'm looking at in order to emulate, so that I can improve my results as well. So let's start by looking at web sales sites. Now, most websites are devoted to sales, but most of them aren't devoted to web sales. But we want to start by looking at web sales sites, even though it's a minority of the websites out there, because they're actually really simple in some ways. Because they sell online, it's very easy to measure success. If somebody puts it in their cart and they check out, and you get their credit card number, that's a win. You were able to get the response you're looking for. So in direct marketing terms, you were able to get the customer to buy, and it's very easy to know that you did because everything is happening online. So the same software that can track whether someone came to your website can also track whether they bought something, which is a little harder when you start to do offline purchases or leads. So let's look at different kinds of web sales sites. So one difference would be an online commerce site versus a pure online site. So online commerce sites like Amazon or like the Peapod grocery shopping services, what they're doing is they allow you to buy online, but you actually get the product you bought offline. So there's a process that occurs after the sale that gives you the product. Now, that doesn't mean that all of these businesses are the same. I mean, if you think about Amazon, Amazon is a very different kind of online commerce site than Peapod. Amazon is really focused on transactions. It's focused on getting someone to do something once, and then obviously they want them to come back and buy again, but each transaction is discrete. Each one is buying something new. It's unusual for you to come back to Amazon and buy the same thing over and over again. I mean, there are some things for which it's true. You might be replenishing supplies of some kind, but for the most part, if you bought a book, you're not buying the same one again. If you bought a piece of electronics, you're not going to buy the same one over again. And so mostly with Amazon, you're buying something you haven't bought before. Peapod is very different. You might be buying the same groceries day after day, week after week, and having them delivered to your house. And so it's a different experience using Peapod because you've saved up lists of the things that you typically buy, and you enter them, and you might be waiting to see things go on sale. You know you're going to buy them, but you're waiting to see a deal on that or a coupon come out. And so even though both of those sites are online commerce sites, the things that they have to do to make their websites work for their customers are different. You don't really need on Peapod to see reviews of every product. You kind of know which product you like, which product you don't like, or it's something you've bought over and over again. So even though Peapod might have reviews on the site, it's not a critical part of every purchase because you're making repeat purchases where you're buying the same things over and over again. Whereas with Amazon, because you're buying something different every time, reviews are critically important. And Amazon pioneered reviews, and you see them on many sites now. Those are online commerce sites. But let's also think about pure online sites. So what are examples of pure online sites? There is no post-purchase step. The delivery happens at the time of the purchase. So let's think of a couple of examples of that. So eTrade is a pure online site. You do your research, you figure out what stock you're going to buy. When you buy it, you own the stock. It's in your portfolio. You're done. You're not waiting for the UPS truck to show up with something. iTunes is another example. You go in, you listen to some music, you decide that you want to buy it. A buck later, you've got it. And it's downloaded to your iPod or your phone, and now you're on your way listening to the music. Now, some businesses that have started out as online commerce are starting to move to be more pure online. Amazon, through its Kindle, is now doing a lot of ebooks, whereas before that you always had to wait for the delivery. Now some of the products that you can buy on Amazon are pure online products. And so these sites are very different from each other, even though they're all web sales sites. And so the reason I'm pointing this out to you is that just because you might have the same kind of goal as another site doesn't mean that the things you do to get better at that goal are exactly the same. So you have to really think about what the differences are in the way that your customer experiences the site. What do they want to have happen to them? And what kinds of things do you do that help facilitate that response that you're trying to get? And do look at other kinds of companies to try and see what you could learn from them. eTrade might be able to learn a lot from iTunes. Perhaps there's things that they could think of that would allow people to sample different kinds of stocks. Maybe they'd want to say, look, if you like this kind of stock, maybe you'd like this one over here, the way Amazon does. And so by looking at what other kinds of industries do, that can give you some ideas for things that maybe aren't happening in your industry. So let's think about what the effect is of online sales. So in online sales sites, product differentiation can be a lot more difficult. If you think about it, many of the online sales sites are retail sites. And what that means is that they're selling the same kinds of products that everybody else is selling. So they don't have anything that's necessarily unique. And so price competition can become the driving factor behind the difference between two different companies selling the same product. So there's a couple of things that retail sites need to think through. One of the ways to differentiate is with different content. So you might have content that's more helpful, you might have content that answers questions a little better. Your content might be designed for different kinds of buyers. It could be that you're using market segmentation to provide the right kind of content to different buyers than another company is. You also can look at site experience. So how can you make the buying experience better, easier? I mean, Amazon has spent years trying to figure out how to do this. How do you have one-click checkout? How can you remember what it is that customers want? How can you suggest products that customers like based on things that they've done before? All of these kinds of things speak to site experience. So these are areas that are good ways to differentiate from your competition. There's no problem with you also trying to differentiate on price. So trying to be the lowest price is fine. The problem is that there's only one winner at being the low price. And what you need is to have ways of being able to pick different segmentation so that you could have content that fits different markets so that you have a chance of winning with some kinds of clients, or different site experience that can help people in different ways than other site experiences might. Because there's no real segmentation for price. Everyone wants to pay the lower price for the same product. So you have to figure out ways of differentiating that isn't always based on having the lowest price. Something else you notice on website sales sites is that as customers have grown more and more accustomed to internet shopping, you see that impulse purchases have risen dramatically. At one point, between 2000 and 2003, they rose from 25% of purchases to 40% of purchases. Now, they've leveled off since then, because obviously you're not going to continue to see that kind of growth rate. But it shows you that as internet shopping began to go mainstream, people became much more likely to purchase on an impulse. So rather than having a clearly thought out idea of what they wanted to buy, they came to a site, looked around, saw something they liked, and bought it. So how do you design your website so that you can benefit from the impulse to purchase? So one thing is to offer a deal. So in studies, it's been shown that that is the #1 trigger for an impulse purchase. People are much more likely to be impulsive when they believe that they're getting a low price, and they believe that that price is something that's going to go away. So if they think that the low price is something that's not going to be there tomorrow, that's going to cause them to jump and to make that purchase. Another thing you need to do to really encourage impulse purchases is to make the purchase simple, make it easy, make it something that's not very hard to do, by taking away all the questions people have. So think about your experiences when you buy things. If you're concerned that you don't have the right product, maybe you're buying a gift for someone and you're not sure it's exactly the right thing, if you know that you're going to be able to easily return it, perhaps by even able to bring it back to a physical store, then that's something that makes that question go away. So think about all of the different questions that your clients might have, that your customers might have, and figure out how you can take away those questions, figure out how you can answer those questions. And when you do that and you make it very easy, you're going to suddenly see your impulse purchases go up. One particular thing that a lot of commerce sites figured out in the middle of the previous decade was that waiting until the end to show shipping costs didn't always help sales. A lot of times people would go all the way through a process to put something in their cart just to see what the shipping cost was. Then when they saw it, they said, oh no, and they would abandon and go to another site. And so some sites found that it was much easier for them to explain what the costs were up front, and that would take away one of the questions, and it would cause people to buy more, especially more on impulse. And another thing that you need to focus on is your site navigation. So one of the things that they found is that impulse purchases are much more likely after they navigate to something on your site rather than using a site search engine. And that might be a commentary on how poor site search engines are, but it could also be that when someone is working hard to search for something, it might be an indication that they have had a plan to buy something, whereas impulse purchases, they don't have an idea of what they're looking for. They're much more likely to be driven by what they see in front of them. So by presenting the kinds of things that people are more likely to buy on impulse, it could be those kinds of things that you can offer a deal on. It could be the kinds of things that people have fewer questions about. By offering those things in your site navigation, you're far more likely to get people to make impulse purchases. Now we said that site search doesn't always lead to impulse purchases, but one thing that's interesting is that web search does. So people go into Google and search for things all the time, and they do end up making impulse purchases. Now, why would that be true? Some people think that the reason that search leads to impulsive behavior is because it is so fast, because it provides instant gratification, that they think that that kind of mindset attracts people who are making impulsive decisions. Now, another thing that's true is that as more and more people begin to use the mobile search and other kinds of mobile digital marketing, things can be even more dynamic because people could actually be in a store and then start looking for information about a product. And so one thing that you can do that helps to take away questions is to reduce the price of your products. Now, most of us don't have the luxury of just lowering prices, but one thing that can be done is you can make your products more granular so that they can be bought in smaller quantities or smaller sizes. So day traders make one trade, whereas somebody who is trying to make big changes in their portfolio is going to spend a lot more time thinking about that than what a day trader does. iTunes pioneered the purchase of just one song rather than having to buy an entire album. And so because the cost of that purchase is so much lower, that the instant gratification effect is high, and so that allows more people to feel impulsive because they feel like this isn't very much money. So now let's look at a different way that web sales sites can differ. Retailers versus manufacturers. So they both might sell a lot of the same products. I mean, you could imagine a manufacturer that sells the same products that all of its retail distributors sell. And they both might sell online or offline or both, but the way that they go about it is different. So think about the ways in which manufacturer sites and retail sites are different. So the breadth of products are different, right? It's different to see products from only one manufacturer, whereas with a retailer you can see products from every manufacturer. Now, on the other hand, the depth of the information on a manufacturer's site is often more. They may know more about their products, they may have more information about their products than a retailer has. A retailer may just have surface information where it just goes over the surface of each of those manufacturer's products, but to really get the lowdown, you want to go to the manufacturer's site. On the other hand, the objectivity of the information is very different. Manufacturers are going to be biased to their own products. I mean, that makes perfect sense, whereas retail sites might tend to be more objective. They are more likely to have reviews on the sites, either from experts or from customers, and it's much more likely that they're going to take an even-handed approach to the information. You can also look at the characteristic of return visits. For manufacturer sites, you're not going to see the same rate of return visits as for retail sites. And so there are some ways in which retailers have an advantage in the customer experience. For example, Amazon learns all sorts of things about its clients because they come there all the time. And so the thing that learns about you in one visit can be applied to the next visit, whereas you might not visit a manufacturer's site as often. And so it's harder for the manufacturer to learn very much about you. So what do manufacturers do on their sites? They stress the brand. So they're constantly stressing what the advantage is, in this case, of Sony style. So that's not the kind of thing you would expect to see on a retail site. Most people wouldn't care whether Sony had any style or not if they were buying it on a retailer site. And maybe they don't care on Sony's site either, but what Sony's trying to do is to say, hey, look, we have a certain level of quality, of reliability, a certain ease of use. Whatever it is that you think Sony style means, Sony is trying to connote a certain brand image so that if you like one Sony product, you're more likely to buy another one. And so the website is going to build navigation around all of its products, and it's going to try and provide deeper information about the product line than you might get on one of its distribution partners or retail sites. And so Sony is going to figure out how it's going to tell you everything you could ever want to know about its products, much more than you might find on the typical retail site. Retailers, on the other hand, stress choice. So they're not talking about how they have products from a particular manufacturer. What they're trying to do is talk about product categories. So you can see on this page that they're not stressing any particular brand. They're saying, here's PC and video games. They may have a deal on a particular brand, like the Wii in this case, but listed right on the left there is every kind of video game there is, whether it's an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Wii, they don't care. There are many different manufacturers listed there, and what they're trying to tell you is that if you know what kind of product you want, if you know the product category, we're going to show you everything that you could buy. And you can compare them to each other. You can look at one versus another in terms of what its features are, what its reviews are, what its price is, how quickly it can be delivered. Anything you want to compare, you can compare. And we're going to focus on deals. We're going to tell you this week, here's the one that might make sense for you because look, it's on sale. Now let's shift gears. Let's look at offline sales sites. Now, as we said earlier, a lot of sites have multiple goals. So here's a web page from Circuit City. So Circuit City was a retail electronics store, and what was Circuit City trying to emphasize? Yes, they're going to sell you online, but they're also highlighting in-store pickup, and they're highlighting it not just at the top of the page in the abstract, but they're emphasizing it for every particular item. So you have a choice. You can add it to the cart and go get it in the store. Or they'll send you to the store. They'll be happy to show you where the local stores are, and you can go out and find it. And because they didn't care whether you bought it online or you went to the store. They had you covered either way. And offline sales sites often will have retail stores or other types of places that they're trying to direct you to. Now, lead sites are similar to those offline sales sites, but the switch happens earlier in the process. So what are the kinds of purchases that you would think of that use lead sites? So often they're big ticket items. So they're homes, they're cars, they're home improvement. Sometimes they're items that require kind of a long sales cycle. They're not things that you just sit down and say, oh boy, I know exactly what I want. So think about life insurance, or think about an estate plan. Suppose you're a lawyer that helps people with their inheritance plans. That's the kind of thing where you're not going to sell an estate plan in a shopping cart on your website. Your purpose for your website is to get them to contact you to make an appointment. And many, many B2B, business-to-business companies are lead sites because B2B is often what you would call a considered purchase. It's something that people buy just once in a while. It might be fairly expensive, so it might be a consulting engagement. It could be some other kind of service. It could be a large piece of equipment for a manufacturer. So any of these kinds of purchases are things where you often have those things happen with face-to-face sales forces, or at least phone sales forces. And so those sites you would think of more as lead sites. Another kind of site is a market awareness site. So think about the kinds of consumer products that you often see on television. They're using television for brand awareness. And so if you think about Coca-Cola or cereal companies, one classic example is movies, where they're trying to just explain to you what movies are opening this weekend so that when you go to the theater you might see theirs. Although movies are now changing, just like we talked about how sometimes you'll see sites that start out as being e-commerce sites that are online commerce, and then they are starting to move to pure online sites. Like we talked about how Amazon is moving from shipping books to having ebooks, where they're a pure online site where the delivery happens online. Movies is similar. Movies a few years ago were purely market awareness sites, but now it's very possible for you to go look at the movie studio site and then click through on that site and be able to find local theaters and buy a ticket right online. So so you have to be careful to, when you categorize these things, you have to continually pay attention to how the technology is changing so that you can understand what it is that's going on in your business or in someone else's industry that you can maybe apply to your industry. The other thing that's happening with market awareness sites is that social media has become so valuable in terms of market awareness that much more of the investment is going to social media that's not on a company's website than is going to the websites at this point. So you see that there are lots of big brands like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, many other of those large consumer brands are focusing on social media, whether it's because they're sponsoring concerts or other events, or there's all sorts of ways in which social media is getting the word out for these big brands these days. Another kind of site is an information and entertainment site. So CNN's an information site. ESPN you could think of as being an information site or maybe an entertainment site. So the call to action here is really simple. Read the page. All they're looking for is traffic. With most of these other sites, we were talking about how they had to get people to do something. Well, the main thing that information and entertainment sites have to do is get people to come. Show up in the search engines and click through. Get people to subscribe to RSS feeds. The kinds of things that they need to do is to display advertising, so they just need page views. But even those sites sometimes have upsell products that require conversions, and so it's not often true that companies only have one purpose. So we keep talking about this. It's very easy to say, well, what is the direct marketing principle here? The direct marketing principle is get people to respond. What response do I want them to make? And pick one thing. But often, companies are much more complex than that, and they can pick multiple things. So sometimes even these information and entertainment sites are now trying to sell products. So ESPN, for example, sells subscriptions. So here's an example of how they do that. They have an insider designation where you can purchase a premium membership in the site and you can be an insider. And this gives you premium content. So there might be some kinds of content that is not given away for free, but if you have an insider membership, then you get to see that content. And they sometimes give away that premium content. So they tease it. I mean, they're showing all the regular users that the premium content's here. And if you click through, they're going to ask you if you can sign in. But the other thing that happens is that they're giving away some of the content sometimes so that you see how good it is and then you're motivated to buy it. The last kind of site we're going to look at is a persuasion site. So you might be a charitable organization, or you might be a political organization, and what you're really trying to do is to sway public opinion, or get people to donate to your charity. Now, everybody is trying to persuade, but you still need to think about what conversions are. So, are you trying to get them to volunteer, to donate, to do something else, to vote a certain way? What is it you're trying to get them to do? And can you count it? I mean, you might be trying to get them to vote for something, but can you really count which way they voted? Probably not. But if you know that someone volunteered for your campaign, you can be pretty sure how the vote went. If you get people to donate, you probably know how they voted. And so that's the kind of thing to really think about with persuasion sites. Yes, you're trying to change their opinion, but that's not the easiest thing to measure. So what you have to think about, and this is a direct marketing principle, is even if your goal is to do something that's hard to measure, you want to come up with some kind of proxy that's easy to measure. So for political campaigns, for example, if people volunteer for the campaign or they donate money to the campaign, that's a very good way of knowing who they voted for. And it's much harder maybe with some other kinds of things. But this is what you're needing to focus on for persuasion sites. It's very hard to measure whether someone was persuaded, so instead you want to set up things that let them do something. And so a lot of the times what's happening is that because volunteering and donating are a fairly high degree of commitment, they're trying to do other kinds of things that are maybe a lower degree of commitment. So just share the content with someone else, send an email to a friend, or to like something on Facebook. All these kinds of things are ways of taking action, and they're things you can measure, but they don't require a whole lot of persuasion, and so you'll be able to get a lot broader base to find out how that's working. So we've talked a lot about what kind of site you have and what you're trying to get people to do, and all those kinds of things are your online conversions. So you might not sell online. I mean, you might. I mean, if you have online sales, then you got a shopping cart, and that's great. But as we've said, most businesses do not have shopping carts. So what is it they're trying to get people to do? They might be trying to get them to find a store or a dealer or a business partner. Or they might be trying to get them to make a phone call or follow an affiliate link. There's all sorts of things that they might be trying to get them to do. Most of those things are you would think of as offline sales sites. But what do lead sites do? They might want you to fill out a contact form. When I worked at IBM, one of the things they tried to get you to do is to download a white paper. Now the reason they would do that is because they knew that 4% of the people who downloaded that white paper were going to buy $50,000 in consulting. And so what was it worth to download that white paper? It was worth 4% of $50,000. And so that's a way for you to give people something to do that's going to lead to the sale. And so that's what lead sites and offline sales sites have to think about, or any site other than online sales sites. How can you give them something to do that you can measure that leads them to a sale, even though it might not be the thing that gets them to buy immediately? You can't measure possibly that they actually did create the sale, but you can measure the thing that they did online that leads to a sale. So let's think about how conversions work. So conversions are a term that come out of sales. When people talk about conversions, they're talking about converting someone from being a prospect to a customer. And so people also think about the conversion rate, and they often depict that as a funnel where the prospects get poured in at the top and a few customers dribble out at the bottom. So the number of prospects times your conversion rate produces your number of customers. But a lot of people get hung up on conversion rate. They really focus on what percentage of people they're converting, and it's not wrong to focus on that. Obviously, if you can increase your conversion rate, you're going to increase your number of conversions, so that's great. But your most basic goal is to drive conversions. And so if you had a really low conversion rate, but you really had so many prospects that you were driving a large number of customers, that would be a good outcome. And it's not always a good outcome with offline sales because it can be very expensive to have to talk to all those prospects. And so you care about your conversion rate a lot more. But with online sales, it might not be an issue at all. It might be perfectly fine that you've got all of these people coming into your funnel. That's not a problem because it doesn't cost very much to just service a website or some other kind of digital property. So the thing to focus on first is how do you get more conversions? Not necessarily how do you get a higher conversion rate. So let's look at how you can understand your conversion rate a little more granularly. So if you think about how offline sales teams work, traditional direct sales forces, they don't just look at their conversion rate. They know that there are many steps in the process. So they can look at kind of mini conversions where they might qualify a prospect into a lead. Then they might identify a bunch of those leads that they're selling to actively, and those become candidates to close, and only those closed candidates become customers. Now, why would they break things up this way? I mean, in a sense, it's kind of artificial. I mean, what difference does it make where somebody dropped out when they're from becoming a lead, or whether they went all the way down and decided not to actually buy when you were closing them? Well, it matters a great deal because it can tell you where things are going wrong in the process. If only 10% of your prospects are becoming leads, it's likely that the kinds of prospects you're getting are not terribly well qualified. You might be fishing for fish in the wrong places. And so by focusing on what these numbers are and seeing how they change, that can help you identify where the problems are. And it might tell you, hey, look, where are we getting these prospects from? We bought a bunch of mailing lists. Maybe we're not buying very high quality mailing lists. Maybe they're not a very good match for our business. On the other hand, you could have an offline sales team that's doing quite well qualifying the prospects and selling them, but they never seem to close anybody. Their close rate is so low. And so you might ask yourself, why is that happening? Well, it could be that maybe a few of your best salespeople retired in the last few months, and now you've got people who are rookies, and they're having a lot more trouble overcoming client objections right at the end of the process than the veterans did. And so all of these things can help you to understand where the problems are. And that's what you really want to focus on, because when you know where the problems are, then you can try to change things so that you fix them. And so in this example, you might have had a 6% conversion rate. So 6% of your prospects became customers. But by breaking it down, you can see where you can improve. So maybe you can improve by taking the qualifying step and seeing how can we qualify more prospects? How can we get a better set of prospects dropping into the top of that pipeline, the top of that funnel? Or maybe you want to say, hey, look, how about if we change the way we do our sales to leads? Maybe we're finding certain kinds of leads that aren't closing. Maybe if we looked at the 50% of leads that we're not able to develop into candidates, maybe we'll find that they're different from the leads we are developing in some way. Maybe there's a market segmentation that we're missing here. Or you might find out that you're having trouble closing. And so if you're getting clients that come all the way through to be candidates to close and you're not able to close them, or your close rate dropped from 30% to 20% last month, you might want to figure out why. What are the objections that clients are coming up with, and how are we answering them? Is there something about that our competition has changed? Is there something about what customers want that's changed? You can look at all these kinds of questions and help you to figure out what it is that you're doing wrong or what you could do better. Now we can take all the things we just learned about mini conversions applied to offline sales cycles, and we can apply them to your website. But instead of thinking about qualifying customers or us selling them, let's think more in terms of the customers themselves and what they're doing, because digital marketing is pretty much self-serve. Customers are going to do what they're going to do. You're not involved in the process as a person usually. You're only involved in terms of the material that you provide to them. So let's look at what these steps might be called from a customer-centric point of view. You can call them learn, shop, and buy. Now, not every business follows this kind of model, but many of them do. So let's start by looking at this. So what does it mean to be learning about something? Well, it means that a prospect or a customer might have a problem, and they're trying to learn about what kinds of offerings might solve that problem. They might be products, they might be services, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that they're going into a situation where something's wrong, something's bothering them, something isn't the way they want it to be. And your job is to persuade them that you have the solution to their problem. Shop is a different step than learn. By the shop step, the prospective customer already knows that there are products or services that solve this problem. And so they've already identified what we would call the product category. And they're interested in buying one, but they might not know which one. So now they're comparing different offerings against each other, which is very different from where they were earlier, where they were trying to figure out if there was anything that could solve their problem. Now they've done their research, they understand what kinds of things could solve their problem, and now you're at the step where you're trying to persuade people that your offering is better than your competitors. In the buy step, there's different information yet that's required. So they have already decided that which one they want. So they have figured out which one from the product category they're ready to go get. And now the question is whether the experience, whether the price, whether the shipping time, whether all those kinds of things are amenable to the client. And so there's different information at each of these stages that's important. So in the learn stage, you have to help customers understand that you know how to solve their problem. In the shop stage, you have to explain to them why your offering is better than the competition and why it's worth the money. And in the buy stage, you have to help them understand all the different things that help them complete their purchase, whether it's how long it's going to take to ship, what the shipping costs are. They're trying to decide who they're buying from. So they already decided the product that they're going to buy, but are they going to buy from you? Are they going to buy it from a retailer? Or are they going to buy from the manufacturer? Who are they going to buy from? That's what the buy step's all about. And so there's different kinds of information that's presented at each of these steps. We can also think about extending the model for other reasons that people come to your website. So if after they buy something from you, they have to wait in order to get the purchase, then that's a step. They may come back to your website a couple of times looking at the UPS or FedEx number that tells them where their shipment is. Depending on your product, you may have a lot of contact with the customer after they've bought because they may have questions about how to use it. They may have problems with the product that your customer service people will help them with. And so that's the use step. And so not all businesses have all of these steps, but we want to think richly so that you could then apply which things matter for your business by looking at all these different steps. So you might have a business that has learn, shop, buy, get, and use in it. Or you might give them different names depending on what your business is. But what you want to think about is what are all the different reasons that people might come to your website? And what can you do to get them to move to whatever the next step is from where they are now? It's usually helpful to take these steps and depict them as a closed loop. Now, the reason that you do that is to think about the fact that once you've had a customer that walks through each of these steps, you want to get them to come back and do it again. So people who are using your product, for example, you want them to come back and learn about your new product or learn about another product that might solve a different problem that they have. And so by thinking about this as a cycle, the web conversion cycle, it helps you think about your relationship with your customers, because they're not just transactions. They're not just people who will necessarily come once. They're people who might come over and over again if you do the right things to persuade them. So if you're constantly think about how to persuade them to go from the first step to the second step to the third step, even after they've bought your product and they're using it, you're still persuading them to come back to the site for something so that you can sell them something else. So as we think about the web conversion cycle, we don't just measure the conversions. So we've gone to all this trouble of breaking things up into steps and looking at how one step leads to another and thinking about our marketing as being how do you persuade people to move from step to step to step. And so it's not enough for us to think about just the conversion itself. We need to think about how we measure persuasion for each step of that conversion, each mini conversion that we talked about earlier. And if we're able to think that way, just as we did with the offline sales example, just as we saw that for the offline sales team, they can measure how many of their prospects become qualified leads. And they're going to check and watch that percentage, because if that percentage starts to go down, they might say, what's going wrong here? If that percentage starts to go up, they might say, boy, something good's going on here. Let's make sure we understand what it is so we can do more of it. You can do the same thing with your digital marketing. On your website, you can identify how people go from step to step, and then you can focus on which areas are problems and which areas are working well. Now, a lot of times what is missed when you think this way is that first mini conversion. So what are all of the things that you can do to get people to come to your site? So people might have bookmarked your home page, and from there they can do whatever they want, but you might have a TV ad that drives them to come to the site. They might search. You might have sent out direct mail. There's all sorts of things that can get people to come, and we have a list of them here. And what you need to think about is how you're going to measure the effectiveness of all of these things. So every single marketing tactic that you do is something that you can measure to find out who received, who was exposed to that message, what percentage of them decided to click to come to the site, where did they come on the site, so which step did they show up to in order to come into your process, and then what eventually happened to them. Did they just come to the site, immediately back away and abandon, or did they come to the site and move to the next step and maybe come back a week later and move to another step? All of those things are things that you want to pay attention to, because this tells you how effective your marketing tactics are. You might find that people who come from search are a lot more valuable than people that come from banner ads, but you only find that out by doing the measurements. So let's bring it back to your own site. What is your web conversion cycle? So it's not enough for you to say, well, most of them are learn, shop, buy, get, use. What's yours? So if you have online PC sales, then you've got that cycle. People land on your site, they learn about how they can solve their problems, they shop, now that they know maybe whether they want a desktop or a laptop, and eventually they're going to know, I want a 17-inch screen on my laptop, and then you buy. You might buy online, as depicted in this case, and then they wait to get, they will use. I mean, all those kinds of things are things that happen in online PC sales, and that might be your business, but your business might also be consulting. And so what if it's consulting? Well, a lot of this stuff doesn't happen on your website. They might learn about what you have. They might engage and even send out an RFP online, but they're going to select the consulting company offline. They're going to collaborate to actually receive the consulting services offline. Now, we talked earlier about how we always draw these things as a circle, as a loop, as a cycle. And you might say, when you're looking at the consulting one, you're like, well, why do you do that? I mean, when they're receiving the consulting services, why are you talking about looping them back in? Well, if you think about how a consultant works, it's not just that they're delivering the consulting. They're also walking around and looking for what their next engagement could be. So what is it that the consultant's doing? While they're on site, they are looking around for other problems that they can solve. And they'll be mentioning that to the client. But most clients do not want to engage in that kind of conversation, because they know that the consultant knows way more about it than they do, and they're at a disadvantage. So they don't want to have that conversation. It feels like an uncomfortable sales type situation where someone's trying to sell you something, and most people resist that. But what do they do? Most of the time what they're going to do is they're going to head over to Google and they're going to search for it, and they're going to go back online to learn, because people don't like feeling stupid in front of other people. So when the consultant comes by and says, boy, you really have a supply chain problem too, they're not going to want to engage with that consultant because the consultant knows way more than they do about that subject. What they'll do instead is go online and look up supply chain management, and they'll see if the kinds of problems that supply chain management solves are ones that they think they have. And after they've done that online checking, which they can do without any embarrassment because no one can see that they don't know what they're talking about, then when they get to be a little more edified and they're a little smarter and they know a little more about the subject, then they might be willing to come back and engage again. They might even put out another RFP. But they might just go back to the consultant and say, okay, now I'm ready to have that conversation. And they may select that consultant again. So everything that you do needs to come back to your website. Everything you do needs to figure out how you're going to then move people back into that cycle to come around again. So how does your site work? So we looked at a couple of examples right there, but let's look at a few more. So for a software download store, every step is online. So we didn't have any dotted lines for that one. They're all online. You remember for the consulting example, a couple of those lines were kind of grayed out and dotted. And why? Because we're showing that those things happen offline. For software download, everything happens online. So they've got a learn step, a shop step, a buy step, a use step, but they don't have a get step because you're not waiting to get anything. An ebook store, like on Amazon with Kindle, that's even simpler because you don't need a whole lot of technical support for an ebook. You might need a little, but you probably don't have a lot of support. And so they're just learn, shop, buy. And that's a fairly simple model, and that's what people are doing on their site. For a physical bookstore, they might be doing learn, shop, buy, get. So Amazon, when they're not doing ebooks, they don't have support either. So it's learn, shop, buy, get. There's no real use step. Everybody knows how to read. They're not calling up Amazon saying, I'm having trouble with chapter 6. It doesn't really work that way. For a content subscription site, you might have a similar kind of process, but you might call the steps something different. So we looked at ESPN earlier, where they have people trying to become insiders. So they might discover that this premium content exists. They might decide, we're going to shop around a little. Let me see if I can get this premium content somewhere else. And they decide, well, I don't know. I'm wondering, ESPN seems to have that really good content. They might sample it because ESPN shows them, here's some different content. Here's stuff that you could normally have to pay for, but now today we're giving it to you for nothing. And then eventually they subscribe. Now once they subscribe, there might even, for some kinds of companies, might have even deeper levels of premium content that they discover once they subscribe. And so you can go round and round again. So you need to look at what your business is. You need to look at your steps that your clients go through. You need to understand what the right names are for them. And you need to understand how many they are, and you have to figure out, how do I get people to come around who have already bought from me and buy again? What is my process for doing that? And if you can analyze all those things, you can then define your web conversion cycle. And once you've done that, now you're in a position where you can start to use web analytics to test to see how persuasive your experience is of moving one person from one step to the next. Now, when you're using direct marketing to drive those conversions, you're trying to understand how people go from step to step. Now, understand, this looks really neat. It looks really tidy. It looks like it's a very simple step. People, they land on the site, they learn what they need to learn, they shop, they buy, they get, they use, they come back and learn again. It's not so simple. you know how messy this stuff is. They may land on your site and come back a week later and then go look at some more learn pages. Or they're going to go talk to someone else before they come back to your site and make a decision. Or they go look at 5 of your competitors. And a lot of people start down the process and they abandon and they never come back. Other people come back weeks later, and depending on how your metric system is set up, you might not even know it's the same person. Some people get all the way through, almost ready to buy, and then all of a sudden they get stuck on something. They wonder about something, and they go back into the learn step. Or they leave for months and months and decide they're going to put this off. So even though it looks like this simple step-by-step process, it's very messy, in fact. But that's okay. The fact that it's messy is not a problem, because you can still use web analytics to understand what's going on. You can look to see how many people are coming to your site. And not only how many in aggregate are coming to your site, but how many are coming to your site from each of those different things that we showed earlier. How many come to your site from search? How many come to your site from a particular search engine? How many come to your site from a particular search engine with particular search keywords? All of these things are things that you can check to understand what the effectiveness is of all of these marketing tactics. Then you can see, well, how many of them land on those learn pages? And how many of those people eventually progress to start looking at the shopping pages, where they're comparing you against maybe your competitors? How many of them then view a product page and put those items in the cart? How many check out? So understanding all of those things can help you see what your mini conversion rate is from step to step, and your web analytics system is what's going to help you do that. If you understand what your revenue is in that shopping cart, then you can suddenly see what the impact is of marketing tactics. You know that the chances of someone actually checking out and buying from you might be about 2%. And so every person who comes to that site could be one of those 2%. So if you know what your revenue is, if your average revenue might be $10, and 2% of the people that come to the site spend that $10, then every person who lands on the site is worth 2% of $10. So if they were worth 1% of $10, they'd be worth 10 cents. If they're worth 2% of $10, they're worth 20 cents. That suddenly tells you how much you ought to be spending to get people to come to your site. You probably don't want to be spending more than 20 cents, because if you are, then you might be losing money. And so this is what helps you understand what you're doing. And increasing your success rate at any stage increases the overall conversion rate. It also increases how much it's worth for a new person to come to your site. And so the more persuasive you can make your site, the more you're able to spend on getting people to come to it. So again, it's not just enough to know what your conversion cycle is. You need to know what your conversions are. So look at your site. You probably already have conversions on the site, but you may have a site that doesn't have enough conversions. You might have all sorts of information about your products, but you're not asking people to do something about it. You're just kind of hoping that at some point a miracle occurs and people figure out how to buy from you. You need to make it step by step, and you need to make it simple. You need to entice people to take the next step. You need to make it easy for them. And you need to understand when people are actually fulfilling these conversions. When are they actually converting? So how do you measure those things? If it's happening online, your web analytics system can understand how to measure these things. So if they're checking out in the shopping cart, if they're downloading a white paper, if they're clicking on the store locator, if they're clicking on the Call Me Now button, if they're filling out the contact form with their email address, all of those things are things that happen online. They're all measurable. And you can set up your web analytics system to count each of those things as a conversion. And you can understand what your conversion rate is for people coming to the site for each of those conversions. And so you need to carefully catalog every different kind of conversion you have on the site, and you need to then understand what your conversion rate is for each one. And then you can start working on your site to make it more and more persuasive, so more and more people start to take advantage of those conversions. So how do you use the math here? Let's put it all together. So if 1,000 visitors come to your site, could be every day, could be every hour, could be every month, could be every year. It doesn't matter what the time period is. If 1,000 visitors come to your site and 1% of them convert with whatever that conversion is, if you're an e-commerce site, that conversion might be a sale. But if you're not, it could be downloading a white paper. 1% of them download the white papers. Then you've got 10 conversions. Let's say that's what your web analytics system tells you. That's your baseline. That's where you're starting. Then what is it that you're going to measure? Perhaps you're going to conduct all sorts of activities to increase your conversion rate. You're going to change your prices. You're going to improve your products. You're going to change the content on the site. You're going to make your offers and your content and your experience and your products so much more persuasive. You're going to make them something that people want to buy. And so you're going to double your conversion rate. You're going to make your site twice as persuasive, and that's wonderful. Now instead of 10 conversions, you have 20 conversions. So if you double your conversion rate, you double your conversions. That's excellent. On the other hand, you could have decided to do something completely different. Instead of working on your site, you might have to work on your marketing tactics. So if you double the number of people coming to the site, even if you haven't made the site more persuasive at all, you also double your conversions. So you can see that you could increase your conversion rate, you could increase your traffic. And there's different things you do to do each of these things, but they both accomplish the same thing. So everything you do on your website has to be designed to do at least one of these two things. You're either trying to make your site more persuasive and improve your conversion rate, or you're trying to get more people to discover your site. So everything you do should be able to, you should be able to say, when I do this, this is what I'm expecting to happen. When I do this, I'm expecting more people to come to the site. Or when I'm doing this, I expect that we're going to persuade more of the people coming to the site to buy. That's what you're really trying to do. Everything you do needs to be held up to that kind of scrutiny. So we saw earlier how direct marketers work. They start out with measurement. They start out with projecting some kind of numeric goal. That's what you need to do as well. Every time you're embarking on some kind of marketing improvement, whether it's a new marketing tactic, a campaign to bring people in, or whether it's improving the persuasiveness of your site so that more people will buy, no matter what it is you're doing, you have to identify, this is why we're doing it, this is our guess as to what's going to happen when we do that, and now we're going to use our web analytics system to measure to see whether that actually happened or not. So you could increase your conversion rate, you could increase your traffic, but the really cool thing would be if you did both of them. Because if you doubled your traffic and you double your conversion rate, you quadruple your conversions. So both of these factors build on each other, and they become even more leveraged when you do them both together. So both of these things are critical things for you to be doing for your direct marketing, and you can use your web analytics system to keep score and measure how well you're doing. So on the last slide, we showed you how your conversion rate depends on your visitors. So you have so many visitors come to the site, and your conversion rate determines how many people are buying. But that might not be exactly true. It really depends on your business, whether you're using visitors as your number or visits. So what do we mean by that? Well, visitors are unique people. A visitor counts as one visitor if they come to your site 3 times in one day. They're still the same person, and so that's the same visitor. But those are 3 different visits. And so, depending on your business, it might make sense for you to just be looking at visitors to convert, or it might make sense for you to look at visits to convert. So let's take two examples, right? One would be Toyota. Chances are, if you come to the Toyota site 3 times in one day, you're not going to buy 3 cars. So because that's an expensive, long consideration purchase, it's likely you just keep coming back to the site because you got more questions, and you got another thing that your wife asked you before she's knows which car she wants, and you talk to your buddy who knows an awful lot about cars, and he told you a couple of things, and she can investigate that. And so all the things that you're doing are to come back to the site over and over and over again, but you're still only considering one purchase. So visitors is the right metric for that. On the other hand, Amazon might want to divide by visits to come up with its conversion rate. Why? Because if you come to Amazon 3 times in one day, it's possible that you might buy 3 different things. You might be coming to look at different things all the time. And so it's not out of the question that you could be looking at different things to buy. And so depending on what kind of business you have, you might calculate your conversion rate as the number of conversions divided by visitors, or the number of conversions divided by visits. You should take a look at what makes sense for you. It kind of doesn't matter which one you pick in some sense, because as long as you're comparing the numbers the same way. So if last month you calculated your conversion rate by visitors, and you're doing the same thing this month and the next month and the month after that, you can compare the numbers to each other and it will be consistent. So it's important that you make this decision once, but it's not really that important after you make it, because whatever you do, as long as you're consistent with it, you'll be able to see how things are going up and down and make a decision as to how well you're doing. So we talked about how your analytics system can count conversions. So many of you may not even know what an analytics system is, but it's likely that if you have a website, you've got an analytics system, especially if it's an established website, maybe for an established company. So if you don't have an analytics system, there's a free one that works really well, that's very popular, Google Analytics. It's very easy to implement. You just have to make sure that each of your pages is coded with a particular JavaScript that the Google Analytics help will tell you exactly how to put on your page. So if you're the one who updates your pages, you can put the script right on the page. If someone else does it, you just point them to the script and tell them to put that on the page. And what happens is every time the page is shown, that script is executed and it tells Google that that page has been viewed. You might have a different analytics system. Doesn't matter which one you have. They all work pretty much the same way. They'll count how many pages are viewed, and you can identify for your analytics system which actions on the site are counted as conversions. And so all of those things we talked about earlier are things you can tell your analytics system to pay special attention to. So every time somebody downloads a white paper, I want you to count that as a conversion. Every time somebody checks out their shopping cart, count that as a conversion. You can do that with every different conversion that you have on your site. And the analytics system will tell you how many people have converted, the same way that it'll tell you how many people have come to visit the site. So analytics programs are all well and good for tracking online conversions, but you might be asking yourself how you track offline conversions back to the website. In a lot of businesses, all the transactions happen offline, and the problem is that the originating digital marketing tactics don't get any credit for the offline sales that they're driving. And so how do you then take those offline sales and attribute them back to those original digital channels? Because if you can't do that, you cannot justify the money that you're spending on your website, on your YouTube video, on your display ad, on your search marketing campaign. on whatever the thing is that you did to attract that brand awareness, attract that attention, get that customer interested in your product, and then move them offline to buy it. You cannot justify that investment if you can't tie that sale back to the marketing tactic that originated it. So the easiest way for you to track offline conversions back to the web is for you to contact the customer. So if you can set things up, like on IBM's website, you can click a Call Me Now button. And when you do, IBM will then ask you for your phone number, and then an IBM rep within a couple of minutes will call you, and they know you came from the website. In fact, they even know what page you were on. They can follow your whole activity all the way coming into the website, because the IBM is initiating a contract with the customer. Most websites don't work that way, but even if they did, you can't force a customer to click that button. So the customer may just decide to call you up, or they may decide to just switch offline. So how can you then track things back if the customer is the one who initiates the channel switching? So one way to do it is to get customers to print out something from the website. So you see this example that Cadillac started doing a few years ago. Almost all the car companies do it now, is they let you build your own car. So you say, I want this color interior, I want the leather instead of the cloth, I want the GPS system, and you lay all these things out, and once you've done that, and you've done all that work, you're going to want to print it out so that when you go to the dealer, you don't have to go through all that all over again. And so by doing that, every time someone walks into the dealer with that printout, when they take your name, they take your address, they take your phone number, they also write down they brought in one of the printouts. So if you end up buying a car from them, they know that you started out on the website. And so they can see what the value is of having that website. They can see what the value is of producing the configuration program on the website that lets you pick out your own car. And all of that stuff can be attributed back from the sale. Simpler way of doing it for other kinds of businesses is to print a coupon. You can even identify the coupon numerically. Everyone could have a unique number so that you know which visitor that was and you know what their web history was. You can put in a special phone number. Suppose on your website you put a phone number that was nowhere else. It was only on your website. Then you know that everyone who called it came from your website. There are some companies that put a special phone number on every single web page. They all have different phone numbers. So when you call them up, they know exactly what page you were on. And so all of these things are the kinds of things that you can do, and they all have their roots back in the original direct marketing days, where people would put a print ad in a magazine and they'd say, call this number and ask for Alice. Well, there's no Alice. Alice is this issue of this magazine on this date, so that they knew that that was the ad that worked to get someone to respond. And all of these things are just an updated version of Ask for Alice. They're all ways that you can get the customer to tell you where they came from by actions that they have an incentive to take. So how do these call to action work? So if you look at how Cadillac did it, they can choose which offline action they're going to take. So they could decide that they're going to look at some offers and financing offers and sales price offers, but they could also request a quote. So they could get a dealer to tell them, here's how much I'll sell you that car for. or they could go locate a dealer, or they could search for that car in inventory and see who has it. Any of those things are things that they're able to do. But they start out by being able to just print this out and walk into a dealer. But any of these actions that they have the choice of which one to take, any of them can help Cadillac to attribute this web visit to an eventual sale of a car. Now, not everybody can set things up this way. You need to do something to attribute sales to your site. But you may not have something as easy as this to do. I mean, if you're a pharmaceutical manufacturer, how can you figure out that someone came to your website and then they went and asked their doctor to prescribe a drug for them? It's not that easy to do. And so you may have to use a different method that doesn't help you identify each discrete conversion. So you don't absolutely know, conversion by conversion by conversion, which ones of those started on your website, where they came from, which marketing tactic they came from. You may not be able to do that. So what are other things you could do? You can ask customers when they buy something. So it could be that they called up on the phone. It could be that they're in a retail store. But you can ask them where they came from. Did they come from the website? Where did they come from? You can put a question on warranty cards that ask them how they found out about you. You can run a survey of recent customers and ask them detailed questions about what's going on. And you can use all of those things as surrogates for having that discrete conversion data. But you need to do something. You can't just assume that the website is working. You can't just assume that your digital marketing is doing what it's supposed to do. Because if you take that approach, eventually some flinty-eyed CFO or CEO are going to come in and make you prove why you're spending all that money. What is your return on investment for all these things you're doing? And if you can't prove it, you run the risk of having those funds cut. And so understanding how you can track your return on investment, which is something we're going to talk about in a later class, is how you can actually identify return on investment. It all starts here. It all starts with understanding what your goals are, understanding what your conversions are, and then understanding how you can track sales back to the tactics that led to them. So we've covered an awful lot in just an hour and a half. We've started to focus on what direct marketing principles are and how you use them to make web analytics much more valuable. You always start with what drives the profit in your business. So understanding what the goals are of your website. Why are those things important? Why are those calls to action things that you're trying to get your customers to do? So it's not enough to say, well, we have a site up there that promotes awareness and we think people are paying attention to it and we know that we're getting a lot of buzz, and all of those things are all well and good, but it's more important for you to understand how those actually relate to sales and to profitable sales. And you have to understand that your business is unique. No matter what kind of business it is, it's probably not exactly like anybody else's. And so you can't be afraid to take a look at what your web conversion cycle is. How do you break down the steps? What are your customers doing? And how do you understand how you're going to move from step to step? What is it that your customers are going to do? How are you going to persuade them to do it? And how are you going to measure that you were successful in getting them to do it? That's where the software comes in. So whether you're using Google Analytics or one of their competitors, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that you have to have some way of keeping score. You need to know how many visitors are coming to your site. Where are they coming from? If you can find out things about them, so you can find out demographics. You can use surveys or other kinds of information to find that out. Then use your analytics system to segment based on them as well. And you need to not just know where they came from and where they went, but you need to know whether they converted. You need to understand what it was they did. Did they do the thing you were trying to get them to do? Was your site successful in persuading them? So were you successful in attracting them to your site, and did you get them to do what you wanted them to do on your site? And it doesn't stop on your website. When they click on something to take the next step offline, you don't just clap your hands and say, cool, we got that done. You have to know what happened to them offline. If you don't know that all these people converting with your online web conversions are also a high percentage of them taking the step to go offline and actually buy something, if you don't know that that's happening, then you can't really be sure of what it is that you're doing online. You can't be sure that your marketing is really successful. You can't be sure that what it is that you're doing online is really contributing to the bottom line. You know that it seems successful because you're converting things, but that's not enough. What you need to be able to do is to prove that you're actually making a difference on the bottom line. So thanks so much for paying attention to this lecture. Ash will be back with another lecture next week, and I'll be back for a couple more lectures before the course is over. So thanks again for your time. I hope that this helped you, and now you have the opportunity to take all of your direct marketing principles and apply them to everything you learn about web analytics, so that that web analytics knowledge will now be something that makes your business more profitable. Thanks again.